Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about food justice and social justice and the relationship between the two, and how the food culture fundamentally embodies our relationship with each other and our relationship with nature. And joining us today is an activist who has been working on this for more than 2 decades. As far as I'm concerned, she's an elder in the movement, Brenda Sanders. Brenda, thank
Hello.
you for being here. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me here. This is great. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, tell us how you got started in this. How did you even think about this and how did you get started?
I went vegan almost 24 years ago to be 24 years in June.
Hmm.
And it was through sort of a sacred body philosophy.
Okay.
And I was in my teens and I was sort of searching for something that was meaningful and sort of stumbled across this philosophy of your body being a temple
Hmm.
and being at one with the universe and like these kinds of things, and so a part of that was not consuming animal products.
Hmm.
And so it kind of resonated with me. I just immediately completely overhauled my whole life because it just made sense. And that sort of started my journey. And I it was very solitary for at least a decade.
Hmm.
And so I was one of the people who were like, this is how I live, but I don't try to impose it on others, like that kind of thing. And then about 10 years ago, I um came across some information that sort of it was a study where people in a low income marginalized community of color, and people in a more wealthy white community were they were compared
Hmm.
by Johns Hopkins, and there was seen to be a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And the factor that came up as most prevalent or most prominent was diet. And so I
Hmm.
thought, well, this is the community that I come from, and I have all this information about eating plant-based foods. Why not share this information with others? And I
Hmm.
feel like that's what kind of started my journey as an activist.
Hmm.
Um, and so I've sort of been in this space of advocating and just educating and providing resources and support to other people from my community for a decade now.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's just the best work that I ever could have imagined doing. I honestly can't imagine doing anything else at this point. So
That's amazing. So, when you first got the realization that uh, diet was the major factor behind this difference in life expectancy, what did you do? How did you start?
I went and took all the money out of my savings account, which wasn't much, but I took it all out. And I went and bought cooking demo equipment.
Mm.
And then I just started going door to door to churches, to community
Ah.
centers, even to people's homes, like whoever would have me. And I put together this sort of demonstration where I would talk about plant-based eating. I would talk about the effect that animal products had on the body, had on the environment,
Mhm.
had on the animals. And then at the end of this presentation that people were forced to sit through, I would feed them. I
Mm.
would show them how to make the dish, whatever the dish was that I was making, and then I would just hand out these heaping plates of food to everybody who was in the presentation, and it just became really popular.
Mm.
It got to a point where people started like asking me to come out to churches or community centers or
Hmm.
wherever, health fairs or whatever, and to share this information and to share this delicious food. And that sort of, I don't know, it snowballed into programs and workshops and classes,
Hmm.
and so now there's a whole movement here in Baltimore that's centered around like vegan education. But it started there.
Wonderful. Now, have you figured out how to replicate yourself in lots of cities?
Well, everything I do is replicatable, because
Hmm.
that was sort of the point. I didn't want what I do to just be this cool local thing, but I
Right.
wanted to do it in a way that, other folks could either be trained in how to do it and then they could do it in their cities, that we could have a network of activists who were doing this work. And so that has actually started to happen. People who have gone through our programs now have their own programs locally, and
Hmm.
lots of people, once I founded Afrovegan Society and people
Hmm.
saw what we were able to do through that organization, lots of people have now started contacting us to find out, like, how do I do what you do here in my
Hmm.
city? So, yeah.
Wonderful. So, is that what you mentioned the Afro-Vegan Society? Is that what the Afro-Vegan Society does? Does it train people to be Brenda Sanders?
Well, at the present time, we're trying to figure out how to do that,
Hmm.
in the current, like with the current restrictions and everything, because a lot of what we were doing was in person stuff. It was,
Right.
we were bringing out huge crowds of people, anywhere from hundreds to even thousands of people would come out to take part in our programming,
Hmm.
and so with all the restrictions now, we have sort of brought everything virtual.
Hmm.
All of our programming has been virtual for the last year. And so, just what we've been able to do with our platform is to bring other activists onto our platform so that they could share their information with others. So, whether it be classes, or workshops, or cooking demos, or talks, we've been able to bring um, other activists onto our platform to be able to share whatever
Hmm.
the information is, that they have to share. So that's one way that we definitely have been using, the platform we've bought to
Hmm.
signal boost other activists who promote the same information and who have the same ideologies that we do. And
Hmm.
we're actually currently putting together a training program. Since you mentioned it, we are
Right.
currently putting together a training program where we'll be able to help other activists around the country and even around the world to be able to do exactly what it is that we do.
That's amazing. In fact, we've been working on a platform called the Climate Healers Academy
Mm.
to help people. Basically, we can offer it to you for free if you want to use it.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
yeah.
Okay, that sounds great.
There you go. Incredible. It'll be incredible to have a program like that on the platform so that people can come and take that training and then understand how to be a Brenda Sanders,
Hmm.
in their community. Because I think you have that, yeah, you have that instinctive knowledge of how to reach people. Uh,
Yeah, it's part, I don't know, it's part innate, and it's also part just what I've learned over
mhm,
the years, because I did do some things wrong,
mhm,
and learned from my mistakes, learned from the mistakes of others as
mhm.
well. And so I feel like right now, like I've been able to tweak the programming that we're putting out, to the point where it's really the most effective and helpful programming that we can put out. So.
So, can you tell us a couple of things that you think you did wrong and what you learned from it, and how are you doing it right now?
Yeah, one of the things that I did wrong initially was not sort of meeting people where they are,
Hmm.
and sort of just being very much like, you need to be where I want you to be right now.
Right.
And that doesn't work. It doesn't work as much as you want it to work, as much as you want people to just get it right now, right away,
Mhm.
immediately. It doesn't often work that way. For me, as a teenage person, it did. But,
Mhm.
at the same time, like we're engaging with people from a whole variety of like ages and socioeconomical economic backgrounds, and so everybody's different. And
Mhm.
so it's really important to sort of, as they say, read the room
Right.
and see, like, feel people out and see, like, oh, okay, well, folks don't seem to be feeling this, the way that I'm
Mhm.
presenting it. Let me, change gears. Let me switch gears. And so I had to learn to do that over time. And so
Mhm.
now I can read a room, and just by people's body language, by, their expressions, I can sort of navigate that and present the information in a way that really moves them and that like connects with them on a
Mhm.
human level. So I had to learn that.
That's amazing. Rebecca is asking, how do we sign up for your
Oh,
course?
well, I would say for on the Afro-Vegan Society side, please go to Afro-Vegan Society's website, afrovegansociety.org, and sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media. We're doing great things on social media, and the more folks share our work, the more that it'll get out there.
Right.
This past year has been amazing. The amount of support and encouragement that we've gotten from the vegan community, from the animal rights movement, has just been, I mean, we've never gotten so much support. And I think that a part of that is more folks are sharing our work and talking to others about what we're doing. So
Mhm.
I would say definitely follow us and stay engaged with us.
So, when did you start Thrive Baltimore? How did
Wow.
that happen?
So Thrive Baltimore, we got the building in 2017.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things where sometimes things just fall in my lap. And it's almost like, well, I can't say no to this. As busy as I might be, and as, sort of overcommitted as I might already be, when an opportunity sort of just falls out of the sky like that, like having a building or a base of operations to be able to do all this programming from, we sort of had to just kind of go with it.
Mhm.
Having a community center, it was a lot. And it has been a lot. We've since had to sort of shut things down because of the pandemic, because
Right.
we were bringing out hundreds and hundreds of people, and that was a no-go here in Baltimore, for the past year. But it just like we just had like constant programming. Every
Mhm.
single week there was something. There was a class, there was a cooking demo, there was, a lecture, there was a film screening. And so people, I mean, people just really, really responded to
Mhm.
that level of connection,
Mhm.
to the point where we would have to cut off like admission to things, because like so many people wanted to come out and engage with this programming that, we would have been over capacity
Right.
if we, just kept accepting folks. And so our programming, whether it was the plant-based jumpstart 4-week education program, or the eating for life cooking demos, or the food tastings, or the screenings, whatever it was, we, had like lots and lots of people who were coming out. We always feed people. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
thing. Like, it's just kind of a cultural thing for me, where it's like, if
Mhm.
you're coming out, I'm feeding you. And so
Wonderful.
that kind of became a thing where it was like, well, if you go over to Thrive, they're going to feed you.
Right.
And so that's been just the most amazing experience, and I can't wait to get back to being able to bring people together in
Mhm.
person, because that's I love being able to reach so many more people virtually,
Right.
And that's great, and I won't ever give that up. But I do just kind of miss people and
Right.
the physical proximity to other people. And I'm sure
Right.
that the people miss it as well. So.
Right. Yeah. So Thrive Baltimore became a part of the community there, you know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. People expected us to, like, if a week or two went by where we
Mhm.
didn't have something planned, people would email us or like message us and be like, "What's going on? Like, I haven't seen anything." And we're like, "Okay, it's been 2 weeks." But I mean, that was how, that's how engaged folks are, in this work. And it's actually a surprise because when I first started doing this work in Baltimore in marginalized communities, everybody told me, you're wasting your time. They don't care
Mhm.
about their health. They don't care about animals. They don't care about the environment. And it was almost discouraging to hear so many people saying, don't do
Right.
it. It's going to be a waste of your time. But, I decided to go ahead and do this work anyway, and found that nothing could have been further from the truth. I mean,
Wonderful.
folks, they just didn't know. They just weren't aware because this information is not making it into these communities. And
Right.
as soon as they became aware that, oh, animals are treated this way, this is terrible. What do I do? Like, how do I change this? Or, my goodness, this is the impact that it's having on the environment that I'm a part of. I don't want to be a part of that.
Mhm.
And so people were wrong. And that's just the bottom line. That's what my
Right.
work has proven, is that they were incorrect. So, thankfully.
That's incredible. You know, that's wonderful to hear that uh, in the marginalized communities they understand oppression better than the people in the rich
Exactly.
communities. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, and
Right.
I think that's the piece that was missing, is that, people see folks who are sort of going through their everyday lives and not really engaging with this really important information, like about climate or about
Mhm.
animal abuse or about health. And they think like, oh, they must just not care. And it just never occurs to folks like, oh, they just don't know.
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so, I mean, once people, there's this thing that the older folks would say when I was growing up, when you know better, you can do better. So
Right.
I kind of live by that, and my work is based on that.
Right. So you are a unique activist because you're not only an activist, but you also have social enterprises.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Tell us about that side of you.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's just so much to tell. So, my goal is not just to disseminate information, but it's also to change systems on the
Mhm.
ground.
Mhm.
Because what I've seen just in the time that I've been alive is that, programs come and go, but if the system stays the same, then things don't ever really change.
Right.
And so I've been looking at, how can I use what I know and the work that I've been doing to try to get to the root of why these systems are the way that they are, and possibly start to create some alternatives to the
Mhm.
current systems. So, in marginalized communities of color, there are certain systems like the food system, for example, that is just so deeply entrenched and is so detrimental on every level. But even the folks who are working in these areas don't exactly know how to address it, or they're addressing it in a way that is not truly equitable, or it's not truly right. And
Mhm.
so, what I found in doing work in food justice communities here in Baltimore, is that I am the only one who's bringing the plant based food option to the table. I'm the only one who's bringing up the animals. Oftentimes, the only person who's talking about climate in these
Mhm.
conversations. Not always, because there are environmentalists who are engaged in these circles that do talk about climate, but they still don't talk about it in a way that implicates animal agriculture.
Right.
as the culprit that it is. And so I oftentimes find myself very isolated and um judged in these
Mhm.
circles because I'm saying things that people don't want to hear, and I am talking about issues that people don't want to address.
Mhm.
And so talking about how the food systems that exist in low income communities of color tend to specifically target these folks with the worst, most harmful animal products that exist.
Right.
And just really create a culture where people don't even realize that they have any other option when it comes to food. And so going in and trying to break that down, trying to break down those barriers, trying to rewrite the script so that we're not talking about, oh, people are always going to eat animals.
Right.
That's not going to change. And proposing that it is quite possible to change that dynamic, and this is the way that it could work. And so engaging in that work has been sort of an uphill battle.
Mhm.
um, and and it's been interesting because it's like trying to work in these social justice circles. I feel like I'm sometimes outcast
Mm.
when I bring the animals and climate into the conversation. But when I'm going into vegan and animal rights circles, I sometimes feel like the social justice
It's right.
aspect of what I'm doing is not really
Right.
valued.
Mm.
And so it's sort of like trying to walk this tightrope of incorporating both and getting both to acknowledge the importance of the other. So,
Right.
yeah.
So it's a
Um,
systemic issue, right? So it's and from a systemic perspective, I mean, you were what I find unique about your work is that you actually started a restaurant and started
I
actually selling.
did.
Yeah.
I did. It was under duress.
Okay.
I never wanted to be a person who owns a food establishment, but I at every step of the work, I have listened to what people asked for
Mhm.
and provided for the need, and filled in the gap. And
Mhm.
so it just became so apparent that this food needed to be made available. It just
Right.
it because it wasn't available. And
Mhm.
no matter how many workshops or classes or talks I did, no matter how many experts I brought in to talk about these issues, if the food wasn't there and if people couldn't get to it and
Mhm.
if it wasn't accessible to folks, then how was there going to be any change?
Right.
And so I got together with some other folks who, had been making plant-based food for years and years, other chefs, other caterers here in the Baltimore area, and just started to formulate um, some recipes that would sort of fill some of the needs
Right.
because we would be teaching people how to eat, how to create these plant-based dishes, but they would be like, okay, but what about the meat? Or well, what about the milk? Or what about the cheese? And so we kind of started there
Mhm.
with like making products that would sort of fill that hole for people
Mhm.
or fill in that gap for people, and then we would help them in like crafting different recipes that would be a good substitute
Right.
for whatever it was that they were already eating. So for instance, we made a sort of ground beef product,
Mhm.
grounds, and then we would teach people like, look, this, you don't have to use ground beef or ground turkey. Instead, you can substitute in this product and you can still have your spaghetti, you can still have your lasagna, you can still have your chili, but now you're
Right.
using this wheat protein, product as opposed to animal protein. And they got it, like it clicked for them. And
Mhm.
it was just like, oh, okay, so I can still eat. Because,
Right.
a lot of folks were just like, I don't understand what you mean not eating animal products. How am I going to eat?
Right.
And they just couldn't fathom it. And so we started bringing these products into our events.
Mhm.
If we were doing a workshop or a cooking demo or whatever, we would have a table set up, and these products would just sell out every
Mm.
single time. They would sell out. And then people started to be like, I need to get this, all the time.
Right.
And it was
Right.
like, oh no, okay, fine. So, we opened a storefront because the demand for these products from people who, they aren't going to Whole Foods.
Right.
Like, Whole
Right.
Foods may not be an option for them. They may not even know what Whole Foods is, but they knew, what the Greener Kitchen was because either they had been to our events, they knew somebody who'd been to our events, they had engaged with us at a festival or some other kind of event. And so we just sort of started gaining momentum here locally with the
Mm.
products. And it's sort of gotten to the point, at least here in Baltimore, where like we are the local vegan food substitutes, that like not only people from the community will purchase, but like restaurants and cafes
Mhm.
also now purchase
Mhm.
from us. And so like our cheeses may be, the vegan cheese that they use to veganize their menu options, and our meat substitutes are the meat substitutes they use to veganize their food options. So their vegan food options. So it's been a wild ride. I never
Mhm.
thought when I went and cleaned out my savings account to get
Right.
those, pans and spoons and whatever, that I would end up here. I would have had if somebody had told me that this is what I was doing, I probably would have laughed. Like, no way. No way. So,
So, did Greener Kitchen start in your kitchen, or did you?
oh my gosh. So we started building out the recipes
Mhm.
in our own kitchens. Yes. So yes.
Mhm.
But then we pretty quickly realized if we wanted to like do the festivals and the big events and stuff and really, really spread uh awareness that this delicious plant-based food existed here, that we would have to get into a commercial kitchen. I mean, there was just
Right.
no way
Right.
to do it at the volume that we knew that we had to do it. So then we started engaging with a local commercial kitchen until the space where we are currently in a neighborhood called Pigtown, of all
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
And this particular community is known for the fact that we have the railway that cuts through Pigtown, and
Mhm.
so the pigs would be basically run from the trains where they came in through Pigtown, the main street of Pigtown, and they would run
Mhm.
them to the slaughterhouse. And so it became like this big thing, like, oh, that's Pigtown, that's where they run the pigs.
Right.
And so I think that it's really remarkable that right on Pigtown Main Street is a vegan, food establishment that, and of course, one of the first dishes that we developed when we were going to open in that space was a pulled pork, because we were like, there's no way that we're going to be in Pigtown without like a really good,
Vegan.
pork substitute, like
Right.
a vegan product that can compete. And so we did that, and that is actually one of our most popular dishes at the
Wonderful.
Greener Kitchen. So yeah,
Are you
it's
able to make these things cost competitive with the animal products?
well, that was the goal. That
Mhm.
that was the one of the main goal. I mean, the main goal was that it be delicious, of
Right.
course.
Right.
And as always, my main goal in making vegan food. But our second main goal was to make it competitive. So yeah, the cheeses, the meats. We insist that our recipes, that our products be competitive, because that's sort of the whole point of why we created them was so
Wonderful.
that because everybody should have the option. And that's been my guiding principle from the beginning, is that it is unfair that there, is a whole demographic of our population that these foods are not accessible to them. And I,
Right.
I grew up in the environment where that was the case. And so I wanted to change that dynamic.
Right. So here's a question from the chat. You know, what thoughts or advice do you have for linking the oppression of animals to other systems of oppression uh, and improving our advocacy?
Um,
How would you connect the two? Remember, you went to these two communities and they didn't want to talk about the other.
yeah. Well, it's kind of a complicated question. I used to get this question when I first started doing
Mm,
talks, like years ago. And I think that the answer that I had then is different from the answer that I have today because I've learned so much about
mm,
what to do and what not to do. And what works and what is very bad.
mm. Right.
Because there are certain things that we could do that would be bad, that would have the opposite effect of what hopefully we're trying to accomplish. And
Right.
so the first thing I would say is to just be present and be
Mm,
your authentic self while you're being present. So
mm,
if you are able to go into these other spaces in the way that I am, able
mm.
to go into food justice spaces or go into environmental spaces or environmental justice spaces or wherever, if you're somebody who's fortunate enough to be able to do that, then be present in those spaces for those issues. Because I think
Right.
that what we sometimes, what activists, vegan activists, animal rights activists, oftentimes will do is we come in with an agenda. It's like,
Mm,
I am going to make these people see that they need to see it from this perspective. And so that's sort of the goal in going in. And that becomes apparent right away. And
right.
so if you want to sort of build these bridges with other movements, then you have to come in an authentic way. So you really are concerned about climate change. And so you're in this
Mm,
environmental justice space because of your concerns about climate change, or, social justice issues, or what, food justice, whatever. You really do care about that issue and you're going in to be present in that space. And then by be your authentic self, I mean, like, don't hide who you are. And so I think that oftentimes we tend to either go in at one of two extremes. We either are overbearing and, like, being like, look, this is who this is what I believe in and you need to believe in it too. Or we hide who we are completely, and it's like, oh, I won't even mention the fact that I'm vegan, or I won't even mention
right.
the animals, or, whatever. And I think that the real way to go into these spaces is somewhere in between.
Mm,
I will always be my authentic self. I will always bring animals into the conversation in food justice circles because we're talking about animals. Even if we're just talking about meat, dairy, and eggs, we're still talking about animals ultimately. And
right.
so, I refuse to engage in these conversations without talking about the animals whose bodies we're not talking about,
Right.
whose bodies whose existence we are ignoring as we talk about, the health of meat or dairy or eggs or whatever.
Right.
Um, and I will always be my authentic self when it comes to food. So if there's an opportunity to bring food into an environment, I'm going to volunteer. I'll bring food. I'll bring the food. I'll bring some food. And so
Mm,
in that way, they're going to figure out pretty quickly that I am advocating really strongly for eating plant-based foods for a variety of reasons
right.
in this particular space. And then when an opportunity arises to talk about issues like, if climate change comes up and nobody's talking about animal ag, then I will bring out my facts and statistics and talk about, how animal agriculture is a driver of climate change, how these CAFOs, these industrial farming operations are wreaking havoc on low income communities of color, rural communities of color around the country and around the world. I'm going to bring up these issues in an organic way when the opportunity arises, but I'm also going to be there and be present for whatever is being talked about in those spaces as well. So I would
Yes.
say just doing it in an authentic, organic way is the best.
That's great advice. I
Thank
really
you.
think that everyone should follow that. Be yourself, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and go there with the intention of helping them,
Yeah.
opposed to
Yeah.
with a different agenda.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Right. So, when did you start Afro-Vegan Society, and who are your co-conspirators in that?
Oh my goodness. Yes, AVS. I also never intended to start Afro Vegan Society because I was already very, very, very engaged
Mhm.
in a lot of community based activism. And so when someone who will remain unnamed, I think, because I don't know if she would want me to put her on blast, but one of my greatest supporters, who founded an animal rights and uh, World Hunger
Mhm.
organization, came to me and was like, there needs to be an organization. Like, there needs to be a vegan organization that is reaching out specifically to communities of color. And
Mhm.
I was like, there absolutely does need to be that. And I hope you find that person.
Mhm.
And I hope that they are amazing. And so, she twisted my arm. I don't know. Uh but the need was there for a
Right.
national organization that specifically, because I was finding that there were these huge gaps in
Mhm.
advocacy.
Right.
And on the one hand, I think that it was a good thing because it's not necessarily good for, folks who aren't from these communities to then sort of go into the community and advocate, because they may not know the best way to advocate. They may not understand the barriers. They may not understand the
Right.
attitudes of people. And so, if animal rights folks had been going into um, these marginalized communities of color with this information, they might have done it completely wrong.
Right.
And so I saw it as both an opportunity, but also as sort of an obligation for
Mhm.
me to do this work, because I am from, the housing projects of Baltimore City, grew up food insecure, housing insecure, just with all the same kinds of barriers to just a decent life
Right.
that the folks who I'm currently working with in these communities face every day. And so obviously I would know the best way to go
Right.
about disseminating this information. And so I knew that Afro-Vegan Society needed to exist. I initially resisted being the person to make it exist, but
Mhm.
I'm currently so happy that it does exist, and has existed since 2017, um,
Okay.
as an official, nonprofit. Um, and I can't even imagine this work without Afro Vegan Society, to be honest. So I'm so glad that this unnamed person twisted my arm and just had this great idea. Um,
Yeah, you're given enough hints for us to know who that is. So,
Wonderful person, wonderful and
yeah,
very
amazing human being.
yes, very convincing as
Right.
well. So, and here we are. So,
Always helpful. I know her. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, but it feels like Afro Vegan Society has always existed. It feels
Mm.
like, just the work that we've been able to do, the difference that we've been able to make in our community is just has been so huge that sometimes I look back and I'm like, really, it's only been since 2017. This is, it's amazing. It really is.
Right.
And so right now we have a team of 4.
Mhm.
Four ladies who are just working so hard because it's a lot of work, and so we're all passionate.
Mhm.
uh Jessica Carter, who has lots of experience actually in um with animal rights work,
Mhm.
and also with community based activism, is our director of programming. And then we have Jamila Alfred, who is just a mastermind with social media and marketing. She took
Mhm.
us from just a handful of followers to like tens of thousands of followers in a
Awesome.
pretty short period of time. And she's continued to just, grow our popularity and our visibility in the digital space at just astronomical rates. And then our second Jessica Sanders, it just she just like is our administrative person, and she's just like filling in every gap,
Mhm.
which is a lot. She fills in a lot of gaps because, you never know how much work this is going to be until you get into it. And then you realize, oh, well, it's just us. So we better get it done. So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
we have.
But it's a labor of love, you know.
It
You
is
can feel.
absolutely. None of us would be doing anything else if we could. And we're all
Right.
very clear about that.
Right. Yeah. So the connection between oppression of animals and oppression of people. How are you able to bridge that gap in your education to people?
I think authenticity is going to
Mhm.
be like the theme of this conversation, because again, I can only speak from my own perspective and in
Mhm.
my own voice, and I make it very clear to people there's no way that I, Brenda Sanders, can have, the history that I have,
Mhm.
without seeing the parallels
Right.
between the atrocities committed against human beings and the atrocities that are being committed against animals. I don't even know how I could possibly miss it, you know? And
Right.
so it kind of gets to a point where you have to make a decision. Are you going to just ignore the obvious, or are you going to step into your responsibility as a member of the dominant culture, the dominant species, I should
Right.
say, and
Right.
do something about it? And I think that it takes a pretty special person to take on that responsibility and say, I'm going to do something about it. And those special people are called activists. I would love to see more of us, and I would love to inspire more people to get active and to try to fix some of the things that we've broken,
Mhm.
because we are still at a place where it is presumably still fixable. And so,
Right.
but we need to do it. We need to really be serious about fixing it. And so, I can only speak from my perspective, and I never try to speak from anybody else's perspective. Like, I don't, if I do make comparisons, and I found that it's not always necessary to make
Right.
comparisons, that
Right.
you can actually reach people by specifically speaking on what is happening to animals.
Right.
In my experience in speaking to thousands upon thousands of people at this point, between my speaking tours and just the programming out of Thrive Baltimore, I just don't really meet people who, at least in the communities where I work, who I talk about these issues to, and they're like, don't care.
Right.
I don't meet those people.
Right.
And I'm that's not to say that there aren't people who don't care, but I think that the average person does, and would, if the information was presented to them in the right way. Now, if you're going to present the information as, you know, what's happening to animals is exactly like what happened to your ancestors, or, it's
Right.
even worse than anything that you have ever, well, then you're probably going to come up against some resistance.
Right.
And it's like, well, what was even the point of that?
Right.
Like, I think that the point is to try to convince other human beings that they should want to be a part of the solution, not to push people away because you want to be right.
Right.
That doesn't help animals at all. And so yeah, and so you kind of learn that as well. You learn to speak from your own perspective, to use your own experiences, and
Mm,
to if you're talking about the animals, then focus on the animals, because there's plenty to talk about. There is
absolutely.
plenty to talk about without having to bring, human
Right.
atrocities into it. So,
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with that very much because I found that when I speak to people, speaking from my own perspective, what I learned, how I learned it, how I was ignorant in the beginning and how I learned it, that helps them click,
hmm
them to click with their own experience because I don't even know what their experiences are. So,
right, right.
so the
So,
best I
like,
can do is just speak from mine. Yeah.
right, and connect,
And connect.
connect on a human level, because we're trying to convince people to sort of, be allies or co-conspirators, with these, exploited beings who, maybe, they aren't able to, do it on their own. And so here we are, trying to help. And I think sometimes we end up doing harm, in the
Mm,
process, and we never want that. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I think more than being allies, I think we need to become like accomplices. Tell
Mm,
them we are helping you. We want your social justice issue to be resolved as well. That's why we are
yeah.
here. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
right. So, I mean, this
I
is
I
a
I
go ahead.
believe in the accomplices sort of perspective, but I always wonder if the person who I'm talking to also sees it that way. So
Mhm.
I kind of tiptoe around it sometimes, and I'm like, allies or helpers.
Right,
So, but I absolutely agree with you about being accomplices.
right. And BJ is saying listening is key. Being able to listen.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Otherwise, you don't get the feel of the room, so to speak. Right.
That's right. That's right.
So, how have you been managing during the pandemic time? I know that you've been giving out food, uh, but have you been continuing your work online?
Oh, yes. One of the ways that the Greener Kitchen felt like we would be able to be really sort of a part of the solution here in Baltimore during this pandemic was through food distribution.
Mhm.
We have access to folks who wanted to give away food, and we also have access to people who needed food.
Mhm.
And so we really kind of focused on that and have been focusing on that um, as a service to the community, which
Mhm.
has been amazing, from just getting produce donated from local distributors to just making delicious hot food and
Mhm.
distributing that. Dr. Bronner's donated a bunch of like hand sanitizer and soap products, and so we're able to give those out. So thankful for that. And the folks who have been on the receiving end of all these things have just expressed so much gratitude, and just have even been like, look, let me know if I can volunteer, to
Mhm.
help out, because they so appreciate what we've been doing. And so that's been amazing. And then with Thrive Baltimore sort of going on hiatus, it's been it was a little scary at first, because
Mhm.
I was like, oh, the speaking tour is canceled and all the events are canceled. Vegan Soul Fest is canceled. We had
I know.
12,000 people come out in,
Right.
2019. And so we were looking forward to increasing those numbers. And so then that was canceled. And so then I was like, well, what do I do? And so I decided, let's just take it all online and see how it goes. And it has gone beautifully. I mean, I just couldn't even have predicted how many people we would be able to reach. Just like our email list alone has like increased by like 200 times. I mean,
What?
it's just it has been just the most oh my gosh, it's just been so rewarding to be able to just expand our reach so dramatically. And that wouldn't have happened if, if I hadn't just kind of jumped out there and said, well, let's try to do this virtually. And it worked. So, but between those two things, that's been keeping me pretty busy.
Mm. Another question in the chat is, thinking about the scale of the problem, do you ever get down?
Mm,
If so, what are your strategies for maintaining a positive attitude?
mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that gets me down isn't so much the scale.
Mm,
Because I kind of understand that, like, the scale is the scale. Like, we can only do what we can do, right?
mm,
And so I kind of focus on that. I think that the information that I'm constantly learning and constantly sort of just swimming in all the time, as you do the research, as you
mm,
familiarize yourself with the systems themselves, that's the stuff that starts to get me down.
mm,
When I'm putting together a lecture and I find out one more thing that I had no idea that they were, that was a common industry practice in animal agriculture. Like, you think you know all the things, and then you find out,
right.
like, oh, and they're doing this. And you found that, like, deep down in on page 50 of some report, by the pork industry, that you may never have even found out about if you weren't searching, right? Or just just every time climate information, like climate change information, gets
Mm,
revised, and you find out, oh, it's even worse.
right.
Like, that kind of thing actually does uh impact um my, I don't know, moods
Mm,
at times. But I don't get overwhelmed. I get motivated, and
mm,
that is probably a gift that I should be more grateful for, because I'm motivated by a challenge. But if something does get me down, like recently, I found out that the I think the beef industry,
mm.
they will feed the cows newspaper. Um,
Newspaper.
right. So they feed them newspaper, and they actually did, like, studies to find out how much newspaper can we feed cows and still get the yield of beef that we want, because it cuts back on feed costs. And so there is a percentage of newspaper that they will feed to cows, um, that is acceptable, right?
Mm,
But there is a number at which the cows die from ink poisoning. So they won't cross that number, but any, whatever amount up until that is acceptable. And of course, I had no idea. I mean, we don't really know
right.
what these folks are feeding to these animals. Or we know something, but we may not know all of it. And so when, like, that hit me really hard, and I got pretty sad. And at the time, I was able to go to an animal sanctuary. It was still, the world was still open at the time, and I did, and I just kind of sat with the cows at the sanctuary, and just felt apologetic and tried
Mm,
to sort of convey that feeling of apology to them.
mm,
And I would do something like that, or go out into nature. I love being in the forest.
mm.
It's like one of my favorite places to be, and so just kind of go into the forest and sit with a tree. And I know that sounds like so I don't know how that sounds, but I will sit amongst trees and just be quiet,
Right.
and just breathe. and that helps to ground me
Right.
a lot of times. So those are some of the things that I would do to sort of recalibrate and bring myself back from that sadness.
Yeah, I mean, it is, it is the truth. The trees do help us
Mm,
ground ourselves. It happens to be the truth, whether people believe it or not. It's
right.
fact, yeah. No, I also, um, understand the scale of the problem, but I also love challenges. That's just like you said, right? So when someone told me this cannot be done, it just
Mm.
motivates me. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
if they say
Absolutely.
a vegan world by 2026, it cannot happen. I say, what? Of course it can happen. You just eat this instead of that. What's the big deal, right?
Right.
So it's
Right.
fundamentally it's an easy thing. Think of, I mean, why can't we shut down the killing machine?
Mm,
We have a killing
mhm.
machine that's killing the planet, and so, and then we sit around thinking, oh my God, the planet is dying. So
It,
don't you
it
think the
can,
killing
yeah.
machine has something to do with it?
Yeah, how about that? A little bit of common sense.
I know. And then people tell me, oh, you'll never be able to shut down the killing machine.
I mean, well, we can't believe that. We cannot believe that. We can't allow ourselves to believe that.
Of course not. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we are not the operators of a killing machine. That's not our role as a species.
No.
Yeah. So,
Mm,
yeah, this is beautiful, Brenda. Thank you so much for being here, and
yeah.
your presence is incredible, and
Oh.
you bring that optimism to all of us.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about the work, about myself. I'm always happy to let people know, that this work is valuable work and it is important. And I don't
Right.
often get the opportunity to tell people that. So thank
Right.
you.
How can we help you? How can the community help you in your
Hmm.
work?
Well, definitely like sharing um, information about us, about
Mhm.
Afro-Vegan Society, and the fact that we exist
Mhm.
would help a whole lot. We obviously we're a 501c3, so if folks want to donate money to help support us in being able to do the work that we're doing, that would be super helpful. We
Mhm.
also in 2020, I think, launched a Patreon,
Okay.
and we wanted to do that so that we could have like special content that we only sort of make available to our Patreon patrons, or they get the content first. And we're able to have some fun and play around with that in a way that we may not be able to do on the bigger platform. And so if folks want to be patrons, that's the kind of thing that they can um that a way that they can support us through the Patreon. And then just like engage with us on social media, comment on our posts.
Mhm.
If you have any specialized skills that might be helpful to us, that you would be willing to donate, like I don't know, if you're a graphic designer and you could help us with one of our campaigns or something, that
Mhm.
would also be super helpful, because none of us have any any talent or experience with graphic design. And I'm sure
Oh,
there's a lot of other areas that we could also use just some basic help with. So yeah, just be in communication, drop us a line.
yeah. In fact, I'll connect you with a great graphic designer who will be willing
Oh, see,
to.
look at that. Already. It's already working. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. We look forward to continuing this conversation. In fact, uh, Rebecca is asking, will you join us and speak at the Vegan World 2026 Convergence?
I
That's
would
happening.
be honored. I
Well,
would be honored.
we would love to have
Speaking
you.
is one of the things that I had no idea that I was good at it until I tried it, and I thought that you're supposed to be terrified, and I wasn't. It just came so naturally, and so it's something that I really enjoy doing. So I would love that.
Wonderful. I look forward to that. And I'll send you the link for that. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank,
Thank you everybody
thank
for
you.
being a part of this experience.
Thank you so much, Brenda.